Why don't we start with the very beginning? How did you get into policing?
A long time ago, I still remember his name though, Sergeant Giamarva. I had done an internship with the police department, Teens on Patrol. I still have the picture of my group, and he had called me and said, there's an exam coming up, and I remembered you from our Teens on Patrol program, and have you thought about it? I think you might be good at it, and so I did.
What did it mean to you to rise the way you did within the department?
It was interesting because you've got a few variables here that it's not just law enforcement, and it's it can be difficult at times because there's so much you have to do to get through the process, and then there's a standard that you have to hold yourself to, and then there's the woman in the male-dominated field. So I was kind of looking at different role models and examples, but there was a police lieutenant who had been promoted to lieutenant in 1959, and she was the first and only black woman, Catherine Hawkins and Jordan. And so that was my role model, well, a major one, because as difficult as it was at times, I thought if she could do this in 1959, I think I can hang in there. But I had different role models, white men, women, because everybody brought different things to the table. They had different skills, things they were good at. And Bob Craig, who I recently heard from when I was promoted to chief, he was a deputy chief when I came here, but really smart man, very personable, and he, I think, played a major role in building my confidence, giving me skills that, he said, Cindy, you gotta stay away from the negative. You're gonna have people that are gonna talk you down and tell you how bad things are, and then you've got ones that are gonna just be positive and give you much better attitude about the work you're doing. Those are the ones you want to spend time with, not the naysayers. And I thought, wow, that doesn't seem that hard to do. And he was right. But I'd say that probably had the biggest influence on building my confidence, is just not letting the negativity, I didn't give them an audience. I just worked with people that would encourage me. And the people that would try to tear me down, either just because I was a woman or a woman of color or both, I just stayed away from it. And it did a lot to really encourage me about being able to do this job. And I don't think I ever looked back from that.
It's probably good advice for almost any job you go into.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I took that, after he told me that, I took that wherever I went. But if someone was going to give me constructive feedback, I would seek them out. That I was open to. But somebody wanted to criticize me just because of the day it was, or maybe they were having a bad day. No, I would not listen to folks like that.
Did you have those types of experiences because you were a black woman?
I did. But I had more positives than the negatives, and I think that's what I take with me the most is, like I said, across the board, men, women, other women, because there were other women who might, be negative or try to tear me down as well. So I think once I just took people as they presented themselves and didn't worry about what race or gender they were, but did they bring something positive to the table? Are they willing to work with me and give me some mentoring and feedback? That was the criteria for me. And that was across the board from all types. So,
you had a leadership role in a group that promoted the hiring and training of minorities in the police department. What success did you find? And then at the same time, you look at the numbers, I think it's in the teens right now in RPD. Where do you think it fell short, or what areas of growth still exist?
Well, realistically, recruitment is difficult around the country for law enforcement because there are a lot of regulations. There's a process you've got to go through for character, your background, and then once you get through it, you've got to go through the academy, which is a lot of work as well. So, there was a Department of Homeland Security. There was a state and local training committee that I sat on for the Noble, and I got an earful about the challenges of recruiting around the country. So it wasn't just us, but what I found that one of the best things I brought to the table is I just made sure people got a fair shot. And that you've still got to pass standards, but you get a fair shot. You don't get a pass, but you get a shot. And I think that's a big value I brought, because it's not just that, but then people walk away maybe with a sense that, okay, it didn't work out for me, but they don't feel that maybe it wasn't a fair process. So that's something I'll push for. Is you got to get a fair shot. And if you, for example, there was one woman a recruit who was in the academy who wasn't doing well in the physical agility. And so I met with her, we talked for a bit, and she was discouraged because it's tough. But then I also connected her with a woman who was very good at on the physical agility part when she went through. And she would come on her own time and meet with her and run around the track and encourage her to, up her game until she was able to make it. So those are the things that I think are helpful. As sometimes you can feel isolated, and sometimes there are cliques, and we don't always all get to feel a part of the team at times. So, and I think by doing that, we make up for that.
What are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to recruiting minorities to a police department?
I think there's, you got a few. There are trust issues. You're competing with other professions. Do I want to take this job where I can make the same or more without a lot of the challenges that come along with being a person of color in uniform? Sometimes, it's a challenge to pass that background or screening process. There are just so many steps at times, but it's also why you want someone that it's a calling for. Not that, okay, well, you can make this amount, okay, great, I think, that's for me. Because it's so much more than that, it really is. Yeah, it's not an easy process, period, but I think that it's already competitive with other areas. And then I know we've worked on that, Captain Mura works quite a bit in that area, and sometimes the process, how long it takes, the interviews, screenings, psychological eval, the physical agility, the written exam, you got to go through all that stuff. And then at the end, you're interviewed by the command staff, and so it's just a long process. And then, like I said, I think when you're competing with other professions, other companies, then I think it just adds to it.
What convinced you to take this role at this time?
I don't know. Sometimes I still ask myself, but yeah, actually, no, it was not on my radar to become a chief right now. Sure, I watched the department. I still have a lot of friends here, and I know there are a lot of good people here that work hard and don't necessarily make the news, but are outstanding people. And so I was always involved in criminal justice reform, eliminating disparity in the justice process. So those things were really on my radar anyway. So I'd gotten an initial request from the mayor that I think about it. But I liked where I was, and I wasn't looking to move. And so I said, thank you. I'm honored, but no, thank you. And so a few weeks later, she asked me again, and she said, I need you to do this. And I don't know, maybe it was something different in her voice, so I told her I would think about it, and I would talk to my husband. I did. I talked to my pastor, and nobody said, I don't think you should do it, and that struck me. But here's the thing: a friend of mine who works in public relations, I was talking to her about it, and she said, "You're not someone that is aspiring to get in that role so you can, flex your muscles and be in charge," she said, "if you would." So she said, "I think you're exactly the kind of person that needs to go there." And so I'm hearing all these different perspectives. From my pastor, he said when he first, had heard about some of the critical incidences recently that were coming about, he said his thought process was, I needed to go back there and go help out. So, I like to think I'm someone that gives deep thought and consideration to decisions, and I didn't want to, but I didn't feel right not doing it, if that makes sense. Yeah, I felt like I had a voice to bring to the table, and still feel that way. But had they found someone else, I would not have been heard about it. But I felt a duty and a responsibility is what it boiled down to. Yep.
Would you ever entertain taking on a permanent position?
I would. I don't like to say no, but I committed for a year, and I'm definitely going to do that. But I'll definitely leave it in a better place than when I came. That's my commitment. But I would definitely consider that. Yes.
Speaking of that, what steps are you taking to leave the department in a better place?
Well, I can't tell you all my strategies, but so I believe in succession, and my ego's not involved where I can't bring someone in who's as good as I am. But in looking at, first of all, that second in command choice for a deputy chief, executive deputy chief is his role, Andre Anderson, he's smart, very sharp. I've known him for a bit, ethical, and I believe once he gets up to speed, if I were suddenly, God forbid, broke my leg or something, I'd be out for a while. He's got it covered, and I've got a decent team of people around. As far as the people we've put in place, the deputy chiefs that report to him, and the commanders are people who've been there for a bit, and I have to give them kudos, because some of them were on their way out the door, but stayed because I asked them to, and so I just want them to know how much I appreciate that. But I've said all along I'm looking for competency, commitment, and ethics. And you put those things in place, you put those people in place, and those things trickle down. That sends a message to the organization that this is how we're going to be moving forward. And so if or when, I move on, you've got some great folks in place. And then we've got a process in place that's picking the leaders as they come along. So, because those things are a consideration. Competency, commitment, ethics. Those are the things that get you promoted in the department. And it's not just promoted to rank, but leadership responsibilities. If there's a key committee or project that somebody's needed for, those are the folks that are going to get picked for that. Because if we think about it, if you go out and you do a good job, and you do it the best way you can, I don't expect that there won't be any mistakes, because I've made them. But do you learn from them? Do you move on, and do you come out of it as a better person? Those are the people that I want representing the department, to represent me, if that's the case. But I want to send a message to the officers, the entire department, that if you do those things, guess what? We're going to pay attention, and you're going to get rewarded for that. And that when you do, it puts you in a position that, you know, you're on a path to leadership in different ways. Because those are important experiences. You know, you get to know people, you see how meetings are run, you want to be efficient. If you say, I'm going to do something, that's an action item, I'll follow up on that. That's training people. That's putting people in readiness for leadership. So, but I want to send the message, when you do a good job, you're going to get rewarded for it. And that's important. And if you have a history that you don't quite know how to treat people, then you're not going to get rewarded for that.
It must have been a difficult position for you when you came in. The command staff, some of them had voluntarily taken demotion, others had retired.
Right.
It must have been, you kind of came in with a void.
Yeah, it was a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. You know, there was a lot going on, a lot of tension, a lot of hurt feelings, and it's difficult. But I think it helped that, like I said, some of those folks I know and knew me, and to the best extent I could, that if I tell them I'm going to do something, then that's what I'm going to do. And if I can't, then I'm not going to promise it. And I think at a time like that, that mattered. And so I think it helped to calm things down. And then, like I said, I just was honest with them. I need your help. And we've got to get the department on track. We can't get out there and help the public if I don't have a fully functioning police department, a whole department that people, things like worrying about your status and where you're going to be, I need to be able to take that off the table so you can go out and do what you need to do and not worry about that. And that we're all in this together. So far, so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've had experience as an officer on the streets of Rochester. You
Right.
grew up in Rochester. You kind of have this whole experience.
Right.
So it makes me think it must have been interesting for you. What was it like when you saw the Prude video, given your broad experience in the community?
Well, the difficult part there is it's tough all around. It's hard, you know, I would imagine for Mr. Prude's family. It's hard for anybody, you know, watching that. But I also know and knew that when you have to look at what happened, what's policy and procedure, law, and you put them all together and say, okay, what do I have? That was a tough part for me at times, is that in the past is that I would hear what was being said, but I would know all of the details. And I know sometimes the optics are tough to try to manage, but it's important to really look at all the information and then come to an assessment about what you're dealing with and what you need to do moving forward. So,
Have you done that in this particular case? Made an assessment?
No, not in the sense that I think maybe you're asking, because what I'm trying to do is let the Attorney General do their job and me not put myself in the middle of that. Because my priority was the police department. I can't help the public if I don't get things on track and people are functioned on being able to get their work done. That's important, and that had to come first.
Two last questions for you. The PAB, do you think it would be helpful in any way to have a citizens board like that have disciplinary powers over officers?
I'm not quite sure yet that I'm in a position to really tell you fully my thoughts on it. I will tell you this, though. I've met with the newly installed executive director and the board chair, and I was impressed with their perspective and attitude. Like, for example, the board chair, she talked a lot about, and that's her background, officer wellness, and she gets that it's a whole package, that part's important. If we want 100% from our folks, then they've got to be able to hit the ground running. They've got to deal with their issues of stress. Things like maybe a lot of the protests that happen that mean a lot of overtime and work for the officers. Now you got people who are tired, who are working day after day after day without the day off, 10, 12-hour shifts. That's going to have an impact, and she gets that. So I was very impressed with that. So I'm kind of getting up to speed on that. The PAB, I know the goal here, that, you know, some things have happened. There are trust issues, I get that. But I'm not going to say I have maybe a concern yet when I haven't seen that. I'm going to wait and see how things go. And but at the end of the day, my job is to, whatever the process is, to have it work as smoothly as possible and make sure that I'm an advocate for the people and also the officers so that we can get things done.
It does seem like you're taking a fairly administrative approach to this.
Mm-hmm.
You brought up one thing that I wanted to ask before the last question. How is morale within the department right now?
We're coming along. It's getting there. One of the biggest ways that I could impact that was to get stable leadership in place, and so I think that helped. And then the plan is next. I want to hear from the officers directly. I want to hear their voices on what concerns they've gotten or they have. And so my assistant had literally put a schedule together of the different roll call times and who to go and talk to, but then this new COVID spike put us back into a different process where we have to change our roll call process to be able to address that. So now I'm back at the drawing board to figure out how we're going to do that and make it all work. But I'm going to get out there because I want to hear it from them directly. So.
Last question, the protesters who are out, from what I gathered having spoken with them, when they say defund the police, a lot of them mean taking a certain portion of the budget, moving it over to mental health response, or folks who are specifically trained for those types of calls. What's your take on that particular interpretation of that slogan?
Well, I don't like the defund the police term. I do not. And I understand people have their different reasons for using it. But what I don't like is being out there and working on different programs where you got to get your message across quickly. Defund doesn't get it for me. It doesn't go there for me. So then the next question is, what does that mean? And how would you take funds away, and what would you do with that, and how would you shift? And I would also wonder, because in my time here before I retired, I remember working here and some of those programs would be cut, and then you had law enforcement that was the default to respond to those types of calls without an increase in budget. So I would wonder or challenge, maybe defunding took place probably years ago in the 90s when you were making those changes. You would take those programs away, and I can't speak for everybody, but I hated to see them go because those were incidences that those services would respond to. You even may get there as an officer and have to call them, but then you could go and they took care of it. I mean, who would have a problem with that? That's a good thing, not bad. But I remember seeing those things get cut and those responsibilities fell on law enforcement, but there was no increase to try to deal with that. So I'm not sure where, you would figure out fund or defund. I do know that I like the idea of those services happening and being done, but that's something I'm in the middle of taking a closer look at. Like, I want to look at our calls for service, calls per officer for our city. Is that comparable? How are we keeping up with the workload? I just can't. I'm not in a position where I'm comfortable saying that that's something that's under our budget that I would support or agree with. But I'm literally in the middle of taking a look at that. So
Anything else you'd like to add, Chief, that I might have missed?
No, I just, pray for us. It's a tough time for this city. By that I mean pray for the entire city. And we're going to be okay. We are. But it's going to take some time. It's going to take some work. But I know that by doing this together, if we're willing to come to the table and have discussions about it, I think we'll be okay. Like, for example, we have some of the protesters out there. You've got protesters who really just are out there and want to see change. And then you've got some that are willing to commit violence. I've watched the videos. I don't think that's an answer either. But we've got to get to a point where we're going to be able to sit across the table from each other and talk about what it is you need, what can we provide, and how we can work through that together. And I don't know a shortcut for that. I really don't. So.